Good morning. We are starting our floral series, and I did say we're doing daffodils. I've chosen this reference to try. It's pretty complicated, but what I'm reacting to is Gary was asking me on Zoom if we could do some negative painting. Of course we will over time, but I chose this one because it has negative painting. And that's going to be a little tricky. But anyway, I thought this was lovely. I will probably simplify it a little bit just in the spirit of the fact that I'm doing a demo and don't want to make it too long. Anyway, I think this is from that Italian watercolor artist, Fabio Castanetti or something like that. But anyway, you can find this. I think I sent it to you on from Pinterest. Since I don't have any daffodils in front of me, I thought his painting really did daffodils justice. You can notice that I did sketch a little bit. I separated the paper. I folded this paper because that's how lazy I am. I folded it in quarters so that I could get the different blossoms in the different quadrants. They're not going to be exact, but it's kind of good for placement because this is a group of flowers, a mass of flowers. It's not one single flower. And so kind of the array, and I think of it as an array. I don't see a vase and I don't see it in the garden, but it's an array of flowers, which I really am drawn to. I think that this will lend itself well. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to use the same palette, the exact same palette, but I want to emphasize that I'm going to be using a spectrum of warm and cool and Quin Gold yellows, and probably the spectrum of these blues. I've only got one red out, you can see, because that mostly relates to this being orange-ish. I can say that, let's see, did I bring this down there? I can say that this is going to end up being a pretty complementary painting because it's going to contain these complements. And even though green will show up and orange will show up, they are combinations of these colors. So that said, I'm going to start painting. I have sent you, or think I've sent you, your packet of references for daffodils, and there are a couple of little kind of cartoony sketches of how to start with them, but I do want to emphasize that all flowers have gesture. They're organic things, and they turn their heads, they look up, they look down, and they look sideways, they look three-quarter. They're not all front-facing forward. So think in terms of gesture, and know that with daffodils, those trumpets are foreshortened, like they would be if they were an arm or a branch on a tree in a landscape. So think of that when you're sketching out your daffs. I didn't detail my drawing. These are just shapes just to get me started. So my painting in the end won't look anything like the reference. But I did use the reference pretty much for placement, and I'll probably kind of try to stick to some regime of the color placement. I'm going to be doing just a series of little light washes. This is hot press, and so a lot of the beginning of this piece will be wet on wet. So the shapes aren't going to be exact, of course. The shaping actually will come with negative painting. Well, I've let this set up. It's not totally dry, but it's dry enough. And you can see that they're just light washes to give a hint of the color. The color will continue to deepen as we go forward. I think this exercise that I'm doing with you, it's probably one of the first times that I'm going to try to let it dry in between layers because of a lot of the negative painting. I just want to say that now that I've put my very thin watery washes down, that when you start to make things stronger and more pronounced, you'll be using more pigment, less water. And that's what I've been kind of trying to prepare here. If you remember the adages about viscosity, the difference between skim milk, whole milk, cream, and yogurt. Or weak tea is one of the early ones. So these are kind of a weak tea skim milk moment. And I'm going to graduate now to kind of the whole milk stage. Well, I'm calling this done. It's not exact. Once I get going with doing a demo, I kind of look away from the reference and actually get lost and make it more my own. I did get lost in this one, and what I did is I started to get too eager about negatively painting, and I negatively painted over the petals of this daffodil. And so, as some of you know, you can go back in and use these Prismacolor hard, soft pastels and integrate them with your watercolors. We all learned from Kathy Gill about the world of ooze, which is using these Prismacolors and then spritzing them to set them, which is just fine. It's not good to to use them when the paper's wet, but I am going to just do a little bit of doctoring here. It's not exact, but it kind of helps you get the idea that you can use these things. It's a shame that I covered that thing over because it was kind of the bride. But we'll leave it at this. That kind of gives you the idea. Let's see, why don't I just, I had already added some here, but I'll add a little bit more. Just so it looks integrated. Anyway, that is it. I did get a little bit of negative painting done around this one and this one. I've made some blossoms, but I'm not unhappy with them. And this is our little exercise for this week.